Ready. Good afternoon, everybody. Shall we start with Kevin doing a roll call of the members present? Any apologies?
Yes, so if you could confirm if you're present in the room or online, Councillor Susan Brown.
Present.
Councillor Andy Graham.
Online.
So we have an apology from Councillor Graham. Councillor David Hingling.
Present and in the room.
Councillor Liz Leffman.
Present in the room.
Councillor David Rahane.
Present in the room.
Councillor Bethia Thomas.
Present in the room.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. And that's just preempted me saying, welcome everyone to this meeting of the Oxfordshire Leaders Joint Committee, and members of the committee and supporting officers are present both physically and remotely. Can I remind everyone that the meeting is being recorded and live streamed? Meeting chat should only be used for messages about speaking and technical issues, not for private discussions. But please do raise the hand function if you wish to speak. I would encourage everyone to ensure that their microphones are off or they are fully muted and they're speaking. When speaking, please give your name and organisation. In terms of evacuation procedures, I think everyone's been here before, but it's out of that door, turn right, and the emergency exit is down that corridor. Moving on, Chair's announcements, that's all of them. Item 2 is minutes of the meeting held on the 2nd of October. Is everybody happy that I sign those as the record of the meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
So everyone, I've got.
Chair, sorry, can I just ask Councillor Graham if you wouldn't mind turning off your camera when you're not speaking? Thank you.
Well,
Poor Andy. I've got one matter arising from the meeting, which was that the letter asked me to send to the Secretary of State has been sent. We have not as yet had a reply. Does anyone else have any matters arising from those minutes? Not. We'll move on to item 3, public participation. We've had no submissions or requests to participate from the public. So we'll move on to item 4, which is the Oxford Growth Commission update. We have Neil Coleman and Mark Singh here with us. So up to you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Chair. I must admit, I hadn't realised till I started preparing for this meeting that it's actually 4 months since we were first here to talk to you all. It doesn't seem that long, but I think it reflects that we've been pretty busy, and so obviously you and your officers in this period. And I should start by saying how appreciative I and everyone involved with the Growth Commission is of the cooperation, collaboration we've had from your officers, and indeed from time to time with yourselves where particular issues have arisen. We've done a huge number of visits and trips around the whole of the county. Obviously, we spent quite a lot of time in Oxford because that's sort of where we're based when we're here for meetings, but we have really benefited from particularly the tours that we did with your officers and indeed with some of your members. And, you know, that's really filled in our understanding, knowledge of the county. So the situation now is that we have been working on an interim report, as I think you're all aware. That report is still in draft. We have shared it with ministers now, but we have not finalised the text of the report. I suspect it won't change that much, but we clearly needed to get views from ministers on what we were saying before we put this in the public domain. It is our intent to put it in the public domain in early December. I hope this isn't going to be one of those early Decembers that drifts into January or even February. It's not our intention. And I think we will be able to stick to that. We did write to what we hoped were the appropriate people, or had conversations with them in each of the districts, explaining that. And also saying that in addition to the report, we were hoping to agree a separate document, which would be an action plan about what we were going to do next. And we would share that with everyone. I think, again, we're hoping that we might get a draft of that together, certainly this year. And I think the point about that is really, I think one of the most important things that we say in our report is that at the moment, one of our very top priorities is accelerating some of the sites that are already allocated in your local plans. I mean, we do talk in the report about issues around longer term strategic planning in Oxfordshire, the history of that, some of the issues that there are around housing growth in particular and aligning housing and economic growth. But I think a lot of that is really a bit more for the medium term. I mean, everybody knows we're in the process of a conversation, if that's the right word, about local government reorganisation. And obviously that's part of the context which we need to be aware of. So I think we recognise that some of the strategic issues that we've been raising will inevitably fall to really be determined once we've been through those processes. I think quite a lot of us are hoping that we may also be able to see a new mayoral strategic authority in due course playing an important part in that. And we are, you know, very welcoming and warm towards the work that you've all been doing, and the impressive way in which, you know, not just authorities in Oxfordshire, but of other authorities that might be in the Thames Valley Authority have come together to put forward a really positive case for getting on with that. And our interim report is very clear in that we have said to ministers, both in the text of a report, but also clearly in verbal conversation with them, that we think it's very important to make as early decisions as possible, both on LGR, but also on the potential mayoral strategic authority. So I think we are keen, as I say, to have further conversations in the short run around sites that can be accelerated and where there's a real prospect of getting spades in the ground in the next 18 months. And I think we want to do that in a focused and concentrated way. So we don't want to go for too many, and we want to go for ones where we all agree there are paths to achieving that. I think we will be looking, and I think we will succeed, hopefully, in agreeing with all the districts that they can participate in that conversation. Further, in the conversations we've been having with ministers and in the department and with Homes England, we have, I think now, agreed that we will get some funding to enable us to significantly increase the Homes England resource working in Oxfordshire and in Oxford, which we hope will help significantly, both in terms of accelerating sites, but also in terms of doing some longer term strategic planning alongside what the county's doing and what you'll all be doing in terms of getting on with strategic planning in the light of, I think it's now an act, isn't it? Almost an act, the Infrastructure and Planning Act. I think one of the things I'd like to say is that if we're looking at economic growth, I think we recognise that it's important that economic growth takes place across the county. I mean, there are obvious places where that's likely to happen and where we need to encourage it. I mean, in South, you have the Milton Park site, and they managed to raise a very significant amount of private funding. And talking to them, I think we're looking to see a big expansion of Milton Park. I think we're also keen to look at the opportunities that there are for the expansion of Harwell. And there are a number of potential opportunities there, but that's really important. And beyond that, I think, we also think that there are real opportunities, particularly around Bicester, with the motor industry, but other opportunities as well. And we can see that already with some of the new developments at Bicester Motion. And indeed in Banbury, we think there are real opportunities as well. So I think it's important for us to stress that we are pushing for economic growth across the county and are ambitious for that across the county. At the same time, we do think strategically that accommodating and enabling more growth close to the city of Oxford is of fundamental importance for the overall opportunities for growth. We took part, and some of you may also be at the launch by the University of the Equinox project, which has a real focus on the innovation sector. And I've been totally bowled over by the amazing way in which the innovation ecosystem around Oxford in particular, but obviously at Harwell and Milton Park as well, has accelerated and matured. And we've seen huge increases in the number of companies that are being spun out of the university, and indeed at Harwell. And the amount of investment is many times that which just a few years ago. So in terms of the opportunities for the sort of growth that can really impact the national economy, it is really important that we support that ecosystem. And obviously one of the things that we were very pleased to have happened, and much of the credit for this actually sits with local authorities, I think particularly the county and also the city, was the government decision to fund the Cowley branch line, which links the three big innovation growth areas around the city. So we do say in our report that we are going to particularly focus on developing the plans for those growth areas, the one around the Cowley branch line. I mean, Mark and I were just this morning getting a presentation from the Ellison Institute about their plans, which are, pretty astonishing. But there's a way to go with that, and it's also really important that we show people in Oxford, in Oxfordshire, that things like that project really do mean benefits for people across the county, both in employment but in other ways as well, and that development is accessible to the public and is supporting connectivity in the area. But there's a lot of other opportunities there. There's the land in South Oxfordshire to the south of the park, the science park, the Ellison Institute. There's the former, well, soon to be, we hope, former Oxford United football stadium, and other land in that area. We have the Crown Estate investing there. So that is an important area. Then we have the area around Oxford Parkway Station and around Kidlington and so on, which frankly is more of a Charwell thing than a city thing at the moment. And we've had some really constructive talks with Charwell about bringing forward a new special framework for that area. And I think we're looking essentially for government to fund Charwell Council to commission and enable that work. And that's a big and important piece of work about that whole area, Kidlington, the tech park, the airport, huge opportunities there for economic growth. And then, of course, there is Oxford West End, where we in particular, have some urgent and long-term work to do on getting the station right. And getting station right is sort of fundamental to getting transport in the whole of the county right. And we do need to recognise that that's urgent, ambitious and difficult. We need to get the western entrance to the station in. We need to do the enabling development for that. And in the long run, we need a new platform to the east. And effectively, we need two new station buildings. It's a big project, but as I say, it's a project of significance for the county. but also there we have some big opportunities on the land Nuffield College own, which is the entrance to Oxford, getting the Oxpen site going, and also looking at the opportunity those you need, where the university is more and more advanced with plans for a really significant new academic building or buildings to provide new facilities for its engineering. And it needs to do that quick because the Parks Road stuff is literally falling down around the engineers. But that's an exciting project. So we do want to press on and prioritise that work alongside the work on accelerating delivery. And finally, we also want, though, to work with all of you and with the county in particular on some of the big infrastructure issues and problems that we have. So that includes getting the flood alleviation scheme away, getting the business case for that approved, which we are close to. We have, at the same time, to make that happen, we have to get the Kennington Bridge investment and money sorted out. Can't take any risks with that falling over. We need to continue with the work on the Oxford sewage treatment works. And more particularly, I think, and a new thing on that, we really need to press Thames Water on other sewage treatment works across the rest of the county. We've had issues there in West Oxfordshire just now, and we absolutely need to get that right. And also, I've talked about the significance of the station at Oxford, but we also need to progress the Oxrail 2040 plan as a whole. And I was at the county's cabinet, which approved that. I don't know, it was last week or the week before. It's a really good plan. It's a good plan for the whole of the county. We need to get on with the business case for the new stations at Bagbrook, Wantage, and Ardley. And the county has put its hand in its pocket, its money where its mouth, whatever you want to say, by finding money for developing the business cases for those new stations. We need to get the bus lanes on the A40 sorted out. I know that there are aspirations for a mass transit scheme down there, and I think that's something we want to support and work with. But really, we have, as a first step, to deal with the issues on the A40, particularly in the light of opportunities for development that are coming forward. We need to work together to get that scheme properly funded, the whole scheme, and to get it implemented. So that's probably more than enough from me. I suppose just in summary, real priority for accelerating sites, keen to work with you all on that to identify them, use that partly to put a bit of leverage on government and Homes England, so if we do this, will you do that? I think that's a helpful opportunity. The infrastructure things, day-to-day work in real time, but also looking ahead at some of the more significant longer term options. Could we move the Oxford City treatment works, free up more land on the Grenoble Road site, but also looking, as I say, at the economic growth opportunities at Milton Park, at Hannah Harwell, elsewhere, but a particular focus on supporting the innovation ecosystem, the urban innovation ecosystem, because that, it seems to me, is the real sort of game changer for the future of economic growth in the county. Lots of other things that need to happen with national government. They need to deliver on Mansion House to provide the scale-up capital that's really needed to keep these amazing companies in the UK rather than being bought up by the Americans all the time. But that's another priority for us. But we've got another year, and before we have to do our final report. And obviously, it's really important to us to sort of maintain the solid and collaborative working relationships we've had with you all so far.
Thank you, Neil. Are you happy to take questions?
Of course, yes.
I've got Beth here.
No, thank you. Thank you for updating us. It's really great to hear that you've been working with our officers. Yeah, so I'm here at Vale, Bethany Thomas, to look at our centres of innovation at Milton Park and Hartwell, and also in your report recognising the infrastructure projects, which probably for Vale is OFAS, the Oxford Flood Alleviation Scheme, and because of that, Kennington Bridge, which is all very linked. And the Botley Road and the train station, and that really is very critical to us. So, but I was going to say last week, at the Oxfordshire Innovation and Manufacturing event in Westminster, it was really interesting, and it really brought home to me how important linking the infrastructure projects, Kim was there, with innovation. And it was namely roads, water, buses, and the grid, really important there. But it was also the link between innovation and manufacturing, because it was a manufacturing showcase. And it, you just sort of mentioned it there about startups, but with the manufacturing, that is sort of grounding business in Oxfordshire as a whole, and I think that's important. So, I just wanted your views on that, the importance of manufacturing.
Yes, and you mentioned the grid, and I didn't actually talk about the grid. We did have a, I think, reasonably successful sort of summit on energy, which I think most of you would have been represented, at least represented at. And we're going to follow through on that. And I actually think that there are some real opportunities to solve some of the more difficult and serious problems. I mean, I pick out Vista, where, you know, we have something like 6,500 homes potentially being blocked by the non-availability of power. And I think there are probably solutions if we can get, you know, the complicated sort of smorgasbord of organisations, but the NESO, you know, SSEN and National Grid to work together collaboratively. And we certainly will be pursuing that there, but we'll be doing other things in other places as well. Yeah, manufacturing, absolutely. I mean, I talked about the Vista Motion, and I can't quite remember its name, except it begins with a Y. Oh, yes, sir. But I mean, that's a remarkable development there, and they are making the best motors in the world, I think. So at least so Porsche and Lamborghini seem to think. And again, shame they were bought perhaps by the Germans, or maybe not, because it's all happening still in Vista. So yes, I think those opportunities are important and can happen again, you know, in many parts of the county. Although, I mean, I think, you know, there's some obvious, you know, places where that's best done. I mean, I also think we need, you know, it makes sense to look at where we can maximise the opportunities in the county for advanced manufacturing, but equally, you know, it's important from an overall growth point of view to look at, you know, some potential where stuff starts, maybe in Oxford or at Harwell or whatever, but the manufacturing follow through might be in Swindon, it might be, you know, in Birmingham. I mean, we have, you know, the extraordinary Moderna plant at Harwell now, which can produce incredible amounts of vaccine in incredibly short times. But they make that there, and then they send it to Swindon to be put into vials. So I'm not saying don't do things in the county. I'm just saying there's a real opportunities for manufacturing here, but also to actually join up what's happening from an innovation point of view here with opportunities elsewhere in the country.
David Hayman.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Neil, for the presentation. Just really wanted to say thank you for coming. It was a real pleasure to take you around and see some of our sites, and it's great to see that coming out in the work with the report that's coming forward. You mentioned Banbury and Vista and the Killington area there. I think it's absolutely right that the Commission focuses on, you know, sites across the county and how all the different parts can work with Oxford for the benefit of all. I think that's really important for the regional economy and national economy going forward. What I really wanted to just support you on was your emphasis on accelerated sites. In Cherwell, we've got something in the order of 10,000 houses with planning permission that haven't been started to be built. You mentioned, you know, the number in Vista, but across the whole district, we've got a significant number waiting to be built. So obviously, the fact that they're not being built has implications on our housing supply, et cetera, et cetera. So the support that you can give and the Commission can give to try and unlock that and get some of the issues resolved is going to be absolutely essential for future growth in Cherwell and indeed the county. So really, they were just the points I just wanted to pick up on that you raised, and just to say thank you and support you in that.
Yeah, well, thanks for that. And you know, I mean, between now and the end of the year, we would really like to have, you know, and we've been completely flexible about this, but we'd really like to have picked out. And I think, you know, I've emphasised the objective of getting on site in the next 18 months. But that doesn't mean, I think, that we will want to ignore opportunities that we know are going to take longer. We just need to be sensible about this. It's one of the reasons why I was so keen to press for the additional Homes England resource. And, you know, that's going to, we are actually talking about recruiting a new team. So I can't promise it in the period I've been talking about. I mean, but we, the Commission and colleagues in MHCLG will have, and the Homes England resource we have already, we'll want to try and do that initial stage of getting an action plan together, identifying what's stopping things happening, what do you do next. You know, we do want to be very realistic about it. I don't want to pick either things that are going to happen anyway, because there's no point in doing that. And I don't want to pick things that actually, you know, really can't do. And just to give us a real focus on those sites, and hopefully we can agree that. And I hope, you know, realistically, knowing how long it takes to get people in, I hope we're going to have that full team in place around April next year. But in the meanwhile, we'll be trying to get as much help from them as possible. And obviously, help from them can be about a whole range of things, but it's partly about, it's obviously at the end of the day often about money, and, you know, the opportunities that particularly the new National Housing Bank may provide to help with cash flowing infrastructure, and so on. What possibilities are there for flexibility around the affordable housing programme and grant, and anything else. So that's just those areas I think we'll be trying to pursue.
Yeah, and building those approved sites obviously has the added benefits of avoiding speculative development in inappropriate locations when we have the housing issues. So absolutely moving on with those. Fantastic.
Andy.
Sorry, Neil, I can't be with you today, but hopefully you can hear me from West Oxfordshire. Thanks very much for your presentation and actually all the work you've done to date. I think it's made a significant movement in terms of economic growth. Although, you know, and particularly in terms of Homes England, unlocking that in terms of support, the support we need for Salt Cross, for example, and that Carterton area, which is a platform for economic growth that it will develop and emerge going forward. I just wanted to ask your view, though, because I don't know if it's in your report, about the visitor economy and the part it plays with the rest, in which you've covered really well. Because the visitor economy is a very important part of this particular area, Oxfordshire. And I just wanted to know what your view was and how you were going to play that into your report.
Well, fortunately, Andy, we do say something about it, so I don't have to make this up. I mean, I think obviously quite a lot of what we talk about is about innovation and that side of things, but we have to come back to saying, look, that is never going to be, you know, that's always going to be a relatively small percentage of the economy, and we'd like to get it up and do as much of it as we can. But there are loads of other sectors. We've already touched on manufacturing, and we do refer specifically to how important the visitor economy is in the county. I mean, we we did have something in about how it would be great, you know, if the government would consider, you know, introducing an ability for local authorities or combined authorities to charge a tourist tax. It looks like that recommendation may well be taken out of our hands this week with the budget. Let's hope that's right. It's not the biggest step, but in terms of a visitor economy, it's really important. The sooner it happens, and the sooner we get money in to support the infrastructure of the visitor economy, the better. And obviously, we've got some incredible attractions right across the county, in the city itself. You know, at Blenheim, we have this ambitious French theme park coming forward, we hope, which is, from a jobs point of view, is really potentially exciting, assuming we can solve all the other problems. But I mean, 6,000 jobs people talked about for that. So I think that illustrates the point. So yes, you know, and as I say, we have got a reference in there about its significance in a list of saying, look, this isn't just about innovation, however important that is. There's lots of other sectors, including also, you know, the foundational economy, you know, the public sector, the health services, the GPs, you know, the retail sector and all that, which, you know, particularly for the towns in the county, you know, really needs support and you know, recognition.
Liz, I think you might be the last one.
Yes, thank you first of all, Neil, for coming to the cabinet meeting, which was last Tuesday. Actually, I know time flies, doesn't it? Which was incredibly helpful, and I just wanted to let the meeting know that this is not going to sit on the shelf as a strategy. In fact, we've got a meeting coming up next week with Network Rail, because they need to be able to build into their forward plans what needs to be done in terms of things like signalling and all the sort of technical stuff that will bring forward places like the Grosvenor Wantage Station. It's all right to say we're going to business case, but they need to be involved in the discussion. So I think it's really important that we carry that forward with our partners and make sure that we're not just having a, you know, sort of conversation amongst ourselves, but that there are actually some practical steps that we can take to make sure that these things actually happen. And the other thing that I just wanted to support was I know we will be discussing with them actually the possibility of some kind of a solution along the A40 for the future. But I think in the short term, one of the things we'd really like to see is the bus lane plan that was part of the growth deal pre-COVID and then had to be truncated because of the fact that we ran out of money. I think if we can find some way of being able to go back to the original plan for the bus lanes, that would be incredibly helpful, because that would take a lot of pressure off the A40 in the short to medium term, although I know that in the longer term we do need another solution.
Yeah, well, I'm completely with you on that. I mean, I hope you can make some very rapid progress, at least, you know, filling out the options and the issues that we need to crack to make that happen. And absolutely, and I mean, I know you come to the new Strategic Rail Promoters Group, but we have Rob Brighouse chairing, and I mean, Rob's engagement and involvement and his very strong networking and knowledge of the railway industry at every level is really helpful to us in that. So, you know, and he's also engaged in the work around the station. I think we're hoping to have, again, before the end of the year, to have formally appointed the new master planners for the station project. And you're absolutely right. You know, we need to have, I think, not just Network Rail, but the Department for Transport properly engaged in these conversations, because in some cases, I think it's very likely we'll be hoping, you know, that I mean, there are projects which it seems to me we are going to need more capital from the Department of Transport, whether that comes probably not soon, but whether that comes as a result of the next spending review, we're going to need to make that case. And part of that case is obviously going to be the very robust plan that we've got, and all the work we'll be doing between now and the SR.
Good news is that you've marked off my bingo card in all the things that I was going to ask you about. I would re-emphasise the bits of infrastructure that people don't talk about, so whether it's power, sewage and health particularly, because we as local authorities don't get much influence on what the health service is up to. So if at the top of the pyramid you can have some influence there, because lack of GP surgeries is probably the biggest single complaint we get where in all the places where we have built houses. Unplugging sites that have been promised. I mean, there's lots of excitement in my ward that a site that was originally in the plan 1998 has finally got some bulldozers on site, but it is literally that long and it's about. And you mentioned Grenoble Road. Remember the site promoters coming along to our local plan inspection and saying Grenoble Road was ready to go, and it still hasn't. So yeah, it's all those unsexy bits. I think usually my role to remind people of those. Cause,
yeah, well, you're so right. I mean, Grenoble Road, you know, it looks really exciting, but we've got pylons still with. We've got a future, long-term or medium-term future of sewage works, and I mean, I know that that Magdalen now and their advisors are getting more advanced with the new master plan for the site, and I think I've been in touch with the planners. So I mean, that's a big opportunity, and I mean. It would be great, and I mean, to be fair, I mean, I wouldn't say, you know, I mean, there's been a lot of unhappiness, understandably, with Thames Water. On the other hand, when we've been talking with them, I mean, first of all, they seem to be up to speed with the programme of works at Oxford. But when we've been talking with them, for example, about the long-term future of the plant there and, you know, the impact that has on the Grenoble Road site, they have been willing to, you know, be quite open-minded in the work they're doing now in terms of looking at a whole range of options for expansion of the existing plant or changing where the stuff hits the environment. And also potentially, are there options in the longer term for moving it? So we'll keep pushing away at that, it's just difficult, obviously, because there continue to be doubts about the future of the business now. It's going to be maintained.
Okay, we'll wrap up there for now, but we do hope you'll come back.
No, absolutely.
I should say, as a resident of Didcot and a member of the Pylon Appreciation Society, there's nothing about a pylon that stopped rebuilding around it. My ward wouldn't have so many green corridors for the power lines. Thank you, and
thank you.
See you next week.
Thanks.
You're welcome to stay and listen to us talk about loads of other things, but you quite understand it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Item 5 is devolution.
Yes.
Kim, to bring us up to date on where we are.
I'll give you a brief 5-minute introduction because I know we'll give what to speak on. But when I was last here on the 2nd of October, we concluded the recommendations we made on that date by asking us to go away and do some briefing with members in each of our councils with a view to taking an expression of interest through the decision-making process. And I'm pleased to say that we have moved on since then, and each of your councils should now be in the process of taking that same expression of interest through to get support for opening discussions with government on a proposed Mayoral Strategic Authority. And I must say that couldn't have followed on better really from the discussion we just had on the Growth Commission, because Neil Coleman has just talked about needing some sort of medium-term arrangement. This is what he's doing is effectively is a time-limited piece of work, but we need to be thinking about what that medium-term and long-term approach is to delivering some of these tackling some of these structural issues. And clearly, there's many areas in which Neil's report crosses over with the work that would be undertaken jointly by all of the councils, whatever they may be in the future, by a Mayoral Strategic Authority, with the leaders of those various councils participating in that. So I'd just like to add on to that, with Councillor Thomas's comment that we were at the Advanced Oxford meeting last week, and just to give you a flavour of what some of the businesses there were saying, the speaker who worked for a local business, the host Susan Staunton, was saying the real concern there was about the loss of IP, which we've heard Neil Coleman talk about today, where we are terrific at inventing things, startups, wonderful spin-outs from the university, but as soon as they want to scale, they have to move to America to get that level of scale. So we're losing the IP abroad, and actually that's a real shame that is happening. Polar Tech talked about the fact that they don't have the necessary transport infrastructure, so they can't get apprentices or employees out to their sites, and they can't necessarily find the skills in the apprentices that are coming forward, because the skills need to be more focused on the engineers of the future that they need. And then Tokamak talked about energy and utilities and how that's really having an impact. In fact, many of the others as well talked about how that's having an impact on their business. And those are areas which we could either, within a Mayoral Strategic Authority, directly have control over or influence with government to an extent that we don't at the moment. And the only influence we have at the moment is through the Growth Commission, getting, as you heard, and being able to move forward now with things like accelerating that Homes England support to get delivery locally, and being able to help influence government in the way it's delivering its policy in the future. So I think that's the purpose really behind us taking this expression of interest forward, with a view to bringing that strategic authority of the future. But I would preface that by saying we are at a very early stage. This is an expression of interest. There is a lot of work yet to be done once for open discussions with government. There are lots of pieces of the jigsaw yet to be put in place, and all we have at the moment is that economic case that says to government, yes, we are a good bet. There's lots of work still to do around how we're going to provide the governance, our funding and financing, the priorities, and all of the various other parts that will make a really effective strategic authority. Thank you.
Anyone have any questions?
Very quickly, I wasn't at the meeting last week where this was discussed, but I just wanted to ask, because we've got all the leaders in the room, is everybody happy with the content of the letter?
Yeah.
Yes.
Ours is going to our cabinet this week.
Fine.
And he says it's fine. Yeah, I think a lot of us had reservations about the report that was going to be an annex to the letter, but we had assurances at our last meeting with Berkshire leaders that that had now been redacted, and we were just going with the letter. So I'm happy at that stage.
Good, thank you. Just wanted to check that everybody was satisfied with the content of the letter.
And obviously it's still to go through our exec.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Fine.
That'll
Okay.
be next.
Thank you. So we move on to item 6, which is enabling community-led housing. Paul, are you going to introduce it? And then we'll pass on to Fiona, who's just joined us. Paul is online, I believe. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon to you all. I hope you can hear me and that my face isn't
Yep.
looming too large on the screen. So community-led housing is, I believe, one of the items that's common to all us councils as a priority, features in all our local plans. And it was that context that led us as a collective to fund a project which was already in train and funded by all the individual councils concerned, to bring our colleagues from Community First Oxfordshire on board to deliver an enabling service for community-led housing. So we fund this service until March of next year. And I'm very pleased to introduce Fiona Brown to you, who is the officer from Community First Oxfordshire who's leading this, to give us an update on where the project has taken us to date. So I'll hand over to you, Fiona, if that's okay.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks, Chair, and thank you for inviting me along to the meeting, which is just, as Paul said, just to give you a brief glimpse, really, of what we've been doing, really on the back of the funding that the Future Oxfordshire Partnership provided for us, which has enabled the service to continue the work. So out of interest, I also provide the rural housing enabling service, just in case that's of any interest to you and you've got any questions about rural housing as well. Yeah, so just a picture there of Hook Norton Community Land Trust Project. That's the chair, Kathy, who is taking handover of those lovely homes from Greencourt Construction. Next slide, please. So yeah, the aims of the service really are to try and grow the community-led housing sector in Oxfordshire, and that's really been done through demonstrating the opportunity to communities, because it's still, you know, not really widely known that this is even a possibility. So we're trying to really just educate people about what's possible. We've also been working with local authorities to try and help develop supportive policies and practices around community-led housing. And then importantly, just supporting the groups who are growing. And we do that really from very inception, from when it's just an idea right through to delivery. Next slide, please. And just a little bit, I thought it was worth just a little bit of a reminder of what we're talking about here, really. That community-led housing is about how things are done, really, rather than what's delivered. So in order to be called community-led housing, it has to adhere to these three principles, and that's that community engagement and consent. And consent's a really important word there. It's not just about consultation. The community has to actively want it and design what happens. And there's all community-led housing groups have a democratic structure in their communities to make sure that all the community voice is heard when making those decisions. Importantly, any benefits that come out of the project are protected for the defined community through the rules of the Community Land Trust or Housing Cooperative or Co-housing Scheme. So they're never lost. That's really important. So somebody can't just come in and sell off the buildings at any point. They are maintained for that community, the benefit of that community. And the community doesn't just design it and walk away. They take a long-term role, ownership, management or stewardship of the properties. So they remain accountable and they remain in control of what happens to that development. And importantly, it's worth noting that it's not just about housing. Increasingly, groups are interested in providing other sorts of community assets, be it community buildings, community open space, it could be energy, growing schemes, all sorts of things. So it leads into very nicely into communities taking on buildings, etc., that are already there, but they can utilise them for community benefit. And just the little diagram there, which I don't know how clear is that, sorry, it's not very big, is really the intersection between those two things. So you've got the three different flavours, I would say, of community-led housing, all with slightly different emphases. So there's co-housing, cooperatives and community land trusts, and there's a sort of sweet spot in the middle where all these lovely things are actually delivered by all of those groups. But hopefully you'll get that in your pack and you'll be able to read that a bit better. But we support all sorts of community-led housing, but in fact the most popular to date has been community land trusts, and I think maybe that reflects the rural nature of our county to some extent, that it's a popular model for villages, etc. Next slide, please. Okay, so just looking at some of the work we've been doing then, I mean, a lot of what we've done over the period that the FOP's been funding us has been really trying to publicise and build on the success of the projects that we've had to date. So that's been, you know, primarily Oxfordshire Community Land Trust, a scheme at Cross Court in Botley, and the Hook Norton project, which was delivered a year ago, finished, completed. And we've been doing that through online and in-person events, just trying to get that message out about, you know, what's possible and really try to inspire people about what they can do for their communities. And you know, Hook Norton in particular, I think was a massively inspirational project in terms of what it achieved, both in terms of housing, but also things like the microgrid and the community building and all the infrastructure that delivered for the village. We've also more recently set up a kind of peer-to-peer, much more of a peer-to-peer group support. So we're bringing groups together so that they can help each other and really add capacity by bringing this movement together across Oxfordshire. So, in terms of working with local authorities, one of the key things I think we've done since the funding was provided by this group was the establishment of the community-led and rural housing steering group. That's been really critical, I think, in building the collaboration between the local authorities and the hub. So we've got a much better working relationship with local authorities, and RPs and community groups come along to that as well. So it feels like, you know, at least we've got a joined up place where we can discuss some of the challenges around this. We've input into the local planning policy, and as Paul mentioned, I think all the local planning authorities now have supported policy about community-led housing in their emerging local plans. We've been thinking through options for delivery with the local authorities, particularly I think around the allocated land for self-build, where there's a real opportunity to bring land forward for community-led opportunities. So we've been working with Salt Cross in West Oxfordshire and on Redbridge Paddock in the city to try and bring schemes forward there. And just really trying to create a more collaborative infrastructure for groups. We've been talking a lot about the issues around funding for this kind of work with people through that steering group. Slide, please. And of course, supporting the development of groups. And this has grown massively over the last couple of years. So the groups in green here are the ones that existed prior to the hub. And then the ones in black have all come on since the inception of the hub. So you can see there are 11 groups now working. The top 4 groups in green, they've either delivered or in Tame's case, about to get on site, and they've delivered 51 homes through that process. And then we've probably got, looking at the other groups, somewhere between 70 or 80 potential homes from those groups. So most of them are incorporated. I would say half of them, more than half of them, have actual site opportunities at the moment. And the thing that's really holding that back is particularly pre-development funding. It's really, really hard since the community-led housing fund disappeared a couple of years ago. For groups to access that funding they need just to get to planning permission, and it's that stage that's a big barrier at the moment. Next slide, please. Okay, so just looking forward, really, I think it feels like we're in such a good position now to build on the momentum that's been created and to continue to try and grow the sector. And as to say, the funding's really helped that. There's a greater commitment through local plan policies, and we've been talking to local authorities about the potential to offer this pre-development revenue funding. Even though community-led housing groups aren't always RPs, there seems to be a willingness in principle to look at funding, and that doesn't need to be grant, that can be a loan, because it can be repaid through the development, the construction development funding once that's secured. We've really worked on and now have increased knowledge and buy-in from the RP sector, and a really important part of this has been having RPs who can partner with groups. And I'd mentioned Soha Housing as playing a particular role in that to date, but there are other organisations, including Cotsway and some of the nationals, Hasto, English Rural, etc., who are now willing to partner our groups. And really to realise that we do need to carry on providing this enabling support right from the beginning. And it's that really early stage support that needs the grant funding, because groups just can't afford to pay us to get this really critical early stage support, without which it's going to take them a lot longer to get established and to understand how to do this stuff. Next slide, please. And just a quote from one of our groups, really, which I'll let you read for yourselves. You don't need me to read it out. And to just say thank you very much for the support you've given. We have now secured some funding for this year, again directly from the local authorities through a service level agreement, and hope to be able to do that next year as well, to be able to continue the service. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to say, those slides will be circulated as part of the pack. You have to speak.
Yeah, yes, I mean, you're welcome to.
Yeah. You want to take some questions if anyone has questions on.
I'm just very glad you brought up the Milton project so also in the presentation. Obviously, it's something that's really great to see it's come to fruition, and I hope that we get many more.
Yeah, we have got Steep Aston hopefully following behind, so I hope so.
Likewise, Botley, that was Botley was one of the first ones.
Yes, it was.
And
sure.
it was probably a bit of a training ground trying to get all the processes.
It was so much.
Yeah. But I'm assuming that was quite a learning experience as well.
It's been fantastic in terms of learning for the sector as a whole, and Oxfordshire Community Land Trust, I'm glad you mentioned, because we really see them as a key partner, and they're beyond the hub in some ways. You know, they predate the hub and they've got a massive amount of skills and experience, but we do work really closely in partnership with them.
And it sounds as though that the whole thing is a growth in learning. So as you develop, you learn more. So yeah.
I think it's really important to try and understand how we can begin to scale this up. You know, so far we are looking at lots of individual small projects, so we're working quite hard to try and think how can we sort of speed up delivery whilst still maintaining that community control and a real hyper local focus. Really.
Yes, if I may just comment, I mean, Betty has just mentioned Crofts Court. Perhaps a reminder for colleagues or new information for those who weren't on this panel previously. £600,000 towards Crofts Court was awarded from the Oxfordshire Housing and Growth Deal from the Affordable Housing pot. So, you know, as a group, through that fund that we've administered, we helped to make that possible through some grant funding as well, and available to, I think, Section 106 money.
Thanks for that. Paul, want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. So Fiona, I mean, when I joined the Vale in 1995, Crofts Court was just beginning, and people familiar with the scheme will know that it took quite literally decades for that scheme to come through, and that's sadly a bit of a common theme for much of this sort of housing. And I realised the words that you spoke about, consensus and democratic engagement, will inevitably slow as we build that. But are you able to offer the committee any words or advice as to how we might speed this process up? Because it does tend to be rather a slow burn.
It does. I have to say some of the other schemes haven't taken that long. So Tame, for example, I think it's been 5 years in the making. And actually development does take a long time. You know, we have to recognise that even with private developers. But really, I think there are a number of things. I mean, community-led housing groups are not competing on a level playing field with other developers, clearly, you know, not even housing associations, because they mostly have no track record. They're going to find finance difficult to come by. So it does need significant support, both to access land, and there have been some really good examples lately. I would mention West Oxfordshire in particular, who are starting to try and identify sites for Chipping Norton Community Land Trust. And so that, you know, that kind of work, and as I mentioned earlier, working on land that's identified through planning policy and where that can come forward as community led as well. So I think there's more work that can be done to speed that up, the land identification. And then also, as I mentioned, one of the key barriers for groups is that pre-development funding. It's so hard to get because, you know, you've got a group who's got no track record. They're trying to raise funding that's completely at risk prior to planning being achieved. And again, you know, just working with the local authorities to see where that could be supported. And as I mentioned, not necessarily, the sector doesn't necessarily need grant at that stage. That could be investment loan. And yeah, I think those are the key parts. Planning is always slow, but that's a reality, I think, at the moment.
Methodical, I think, is the word we're looking for there.
But it is. There is a reality around that. So
Can I ask a supplementary question then, Chair? Would you mind?
Yep, fire away.
Be the last one. So as you go on to talk about funding and how essential it is, and you mentioned at the end of your presentation, Fiona, that you would be talking to the councils about the potential continuation of that. But you also mentioned on your slide about the increased involvement of RPs. You mentioned Soho in particular and Cotsway and others that the committee will be familiar with. Is there any? Can we do any work to try and secure their financial commitment to this process, rather than just relying upon the councils?
Yes, I think that's a really good point. And we have had discussions with SOHAR, and they'd invited me to put forward a proposal to supplement the funding that's come forward from the local authorities. And SOHAR are the organisation that's picked up most of the work so far out of this. So that seems perfectly fair and reasonable that they do that. But on the back of that, during next year, being able to start that conversation with the other RPs who may be interested in doing this work, and seeing whether they would be able to kind of think about front funding. It's very small amounts of money, but you know, it does bring RPs work and opportunities for delivery.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Fiona, for
Thank you very much.
that presentation. And we move on to item 7, which is the net zero route map action plan. Sarah and Aoife going to Venice.
Nice. Right, so share some slides for us. So good afternoon, I'm Sarah Gilbert, I'm Head of Climate Action, Oxfordshire County Council. We're bringing forward this report today, however, on behalf of the District and County Council as a annual update on the programme we have jointly around climate action in the county, and I'll be supported by my colleague Aoife, who will take you through the report as well. It's worth saying, it's worth sort of taking us back, and I think Kevin will move us on to a few slides we've got here. So the actions that we're reporting on today stem from a delivery plan that the council's agreed to deliver the Pathways to a Zero Carbon Action Oxfordshire report that was published by the University of Oxford. We're reporting particularly today on 5 actions that were prioritised to deliver collaboratively, and one of which is actually funded by this committee, the Local Area Energy Plan. That forms one part of a series of programmes that the district and county are delivering. So also within this report, you'll find a link to the broader programmes focused on our statutory responsibilities, the work we do with communities and businesses, the work we're all doing on our own estates. But as we get to look at the next slide, please, Kevin, thanks. We're actually at a milestone within the programme, reporting towards some of our carbon budget targets. So what we'll do in this presentation is firstly take you through how we do performance-wise against some of the numbers on our carbon budget trajectory, and then pull out some highlights from the work under the 5 route map progress.
Next, please. So this is just a high-level overview of the main takeaways from the report. So the Oxfordshire Net Zero Route Map and Action Plan sets out the county's 5-year carbon budgets to meet the Oxfordshire Leading the Way pathway to net zero. So we're 3 years into the first 5-year period in terms of the data we have available, because DESNA's report 2 years in arrears. And we are just over 60% of the way through the budget, which is slightly further ahead than we should be if we were all things being equal across those 5 years. However, this year's data shows that we emitted less than our annualised allocation in 2023. So if we continue this trend, by the end of the 5-year period, we're likely to have recovered our position with regards to the budget, the first budget period. So looking at the breakdown by sector, the bottom half of the slide, these are the key targets for 2025 that Sarah was talking about in the route map and action plan. We met. That's a theme tune because we've met all of these targets all ahead of the time. So we have met or exceeded all of our targets, including domestic transport and industrial emissions reductions, and the number of households at EPC rating B or above. Where you can see the little orange triangle, that's commercial emissions. They were down 19% compared to a target of 31%. However, we do still have 2 years of data. We're waiting for 2 years of data. So we'll revisit that target in 2 years' time when we've got our 2025 data. So the final one then is we're highly unlikely to have reached our EV uptake target of 25,000 registered EVs in Oxfordshire. So that target was set in 2021 based on promising early rates of uptake in the county, and therefore it can be considered relatively a stretch target. We do have work streams addressing uptake, things like Ox Levi, which we will touch on a little bit later, and we've also got a little bit more data if you're interested. Next slide, please. This is just an overview of the appendix, the countywide greenhouse gas emissions appendix. I'm not going to go into that today because I think I covered everything that's important. You can see on the right hand side, that's just a graphical representation of the carbon budgets. We're about to move into the next budget period. But if you have questions on it, we can answer them later. Next, please. Okay, so as Sarah was saying, the route map and action plan represents a series of joint actions which form part of the wider programme of climate action within Oxfordshire. So we're just going to give a very brief overview of what's been happening under each of these themes. And then the next one. So capital delivery of retrofit across the county has progressed well. Hub 2 is now complete and it's being replaced by the Warm Homes local grant, which is going to see nearly 4 million spent on energy efficiency measures for low-income households over the next 3 years. And the Heat Pump Ready programme has also ended with over 30 heat pump installations delivered. In terms of innovation, our award-winning Energy Saver app was launched 18 months ago and has seen over 10,000 downloads. It's been helping residents reduce their energy bills and providing access to energy data from smart meters across Oxfordshire. And then on green skills, Enterprise Oxfordshire has been leading the way with skills boot camps to address the green skills gap and support residents to access jobs created by the green transition. Next one.
Before you move on, I notice Andy's got his hand up.
Oh.
Do you want to ask your question now, Andy?
No, I'll wait until the presentation's finished. Thanks, though.
Thank you. Again, on the Energy Saver app, through that app, we've trialled a new low-cost subscription service for localised energy generation, renewable generation, which has seen 306 properties in the county fitted with solar and battery technology. Sarah mentioned the Oxfordshire Local Area Energy Plan, which is also progressing well. It's moved into phase 2, which is taking district councils embarking on their own leaps, and an investigation of investment strategy for the leap delivery. And then we have the ZCOP Industrial Decarbonisation Project, which has also come to an end. It's outlined the optimal ways for organisations to decarbonise through industrial clusters, and the action plan has commenced with the industrial champion appointment, engagement with the Oxley heat network, feasibility engagement, and the landlord-tenant forum. Do you want to take it?
Yeah, thanks. Right, next slide, thank you. We touched on the uptake of EVs being behind as one of the targets for the county. Obviously, our key role is to provide charging to enable that transition, particularly given we've got 30% of homes in Oxfordshire with no off-street charging. Members will probably be aware that there has been a delay to the rollout of some of this funding, but that's now back on track, and we have a charge point operator in place. Applications are coming through for the EV cable channels that we're planning to put in place under this funding We've also got a programme of community micro hubs being developed with 10 pilot sites already agreed to be rolled out. Thank you. So just touching briefly on the
There's a hand up.
Yeah,
Thanks. So just 2 slides to close. So touching briefly on the work, the joint work we're doing around nature, particularly linked to carbon sequestration. People be aware that the local nature recovery strategy is now published. There is a clear link with opportunities both actually around climate resilience and adaptation, particularly with some of the work that's happening in the west of the county, but also on carbon sequestration. The next phase of that work is to bring forward strategic strategy. Just to highlight to members the funding that is being put in place through Trust for Oxfordshire's Environment on REC, which is a recycling fund to try to accelerate nature markets and nature project coming forward in the county. The County Council put some investment into that fund, and effectively that's a rolling loan scheme to landowners to help them bring both BNG and carbon credit projects to market. And then finally, some work that the district councils in relation to the in conjunction with the LNP have been leading on is to bring forward Nature Mark, which is a principle and a stamp of endorsement for nature market schemes to again help the credibility of those schemes with buyers in the county. The final slide, thanks, Kelly. And there were a number of cross-cutting themes identified as priorities within the report. It hasn't made the slide, but I think one of the key ones to highlight is the expansion of the Zero Carbon Oxford partnership that's worked very effectively at city scale to an Oxfordshire scale to really enable our work across with anchor organisations within the county context. We've been doing quite a lot of work on green finance through our 100 Together events and our publication of green prospectus, and we're now looking at how we can take forward some of the investments and next phase of prospectus by bringing in a joint green finance manager between the county and the LNP. That's the final slide. Before I close, and I'm very happy to take any questions, I just in the context of the meeting wanted to comment, I suppose, on LGR and DEVO in relation to this programme. In terms of LGR, much of the work, as you'll see under the programme, is sort of defraying government funding onto assets that are not the council's own, and therefore will be very relevant post LGR in whatever permutation we end up in. The work we're doing on local area energy planning, again, is designed to work at district scale, and actually it's digitalised and will provide a really important underpinning, I think, for those unitary authorities as they go forward. Clearly, there's also some major opportunities for us around devolution that have been picked up on sort of elsewhere in the meeting. A major challenge with decarbonisation, as with growth, is grid connection. So the opportunity for spatial planning, economic development, and that link with the energy systems operator that might happen at a devolved scale is also really important for this agenda. That's all I want to touch on, but I'm very happy to take questions.
Andy got in first questions.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Really, really good work going on in lots of different aspects, really. Particularly the local area energy plan is not only quite, but it's essential really to have that in place across the whole of Oxfordshire, especially with local plans being developed at this point in time. And it's just checking on that really, whether you've got an overview of the local area energy plan across the whole of Oxfordshire in terms of the integration, the synergy of it within all local plans. But that's my first point. And the second point really was on EV charging. And I kind of feel that I just wanted to raise the issue of the slow chargers and the rapid chargers. quite understandably, load chargers came in at 7 kilowatts, I think it was, and hopefully we're not still doing that as we roll forward, because that's just going to take us backwards. These days, people are looking at rapid chargers as the way forward. And I think, we'll be investing in the wrong things if we're not careful. So I just wanted to know what your view on that was, and whether you can give reassurance that we are looking at a more efficient way of charging EVs, and whether the numbers that you're now projecting can be reached.
Thank you. On the LEAP, you're right, it's sort of a really important underpinning evidence base for local plans. The timetable at the moment for the LEAPs to come forward at a district scale and then a sort of aggregated county version is first draft through to February this year. We're in the middle of a lot of, the districts and ourselves are in the middle of a lot of stakeholder engagement, because what it's trying to do is bring together both grid capacity through the DNOs, known growth in the county and districts, and also projections of the kind of infrastructure we need for net zero. So that's the factors that are being taken into account currently. I suspect that as those drafts come forward, they'll need a fair amount of engagement before they then go through various decision-making processes. So it's likely to be early summertime before those come through. That's not the end of, and as you say, that then is very helpful in informing local planning processes. It's also already providing quite helpful evidence for the county and the district's engagement with some of the planning and questions we're being asked by the DNOs for their future planning, and also for the new National Energy Systems operator operating at a more regional scale. It's putting us in quite a good position to be able to feed data through to that we wouldn't have otherwise had. That's not the end of that piece of work. So there are two more stages following that. One is to look at, off the back of the LEAP, the pipeline of investment that it will generate. How do we want to take forward? How do we want to take that forward as councils? What role should we be playing in various aspects of that development? What should be the role of community ownership in some of that infrastructure? And then finally, how can we get ourselves in a really good position that we can have some of the skills and capacity within our organisations to keep doing these key pieces of work within the organisations going forward. So that's broadly the LEAP programme. On EV charging, there are a variety of speeds of charging coming forward. I will get you a fuller answer for that, though, by our colleague Paul Grambrell, rather than dive into territory where I might get a little bit unstuck. So I'll come back to you on that.
Okay, thank you.
David.
Thanks. Some simple question. So you've got targets in there for 2025 and then 2030 and 2050. What's the kind of interim plan for observing and monitoring between now and 2030? Because it's quite ambitious targets. So at what point will we know that we're on track to meet them, or will we have to diverge? Is something different? How's that look?
You want to talk about the reporting aspects?
Well, yeah. So I was going to say that the primary way that we monitor this is through this reporting process. So obviously we report to you every year, and that allows us to take a look. And we'll be looking much earlier in the year than you've received the report. So it allows us to see if we're experiencing divergence from some of the targets that have been set. You're right to point out that 2025 was one thing, but the targets do become significantly more challenging as we get through that period. So we also have our own dashboard that we use at a county level, which will pick up some of this data in a slightly different context. We use it for our own reporting at county level, but it's entirely applicable to this. So that's the other way that we can make sure that we're keeping on top of the data that's coming out from government, and we're checking it quite regularly.
Great. Thank you for that. One of the things you mentioned was commercial stuff had a 2-year delay in terms of getting the data in, so you had to wait until 2027 to find out if we've met the 2025 targets. Is that a problem, and why does it take 2 years to get that data?
So that data comes from DESNZ or Department of Energy Security Net Zero. All of the data on local authority emissions comes from DESNZ. Unfortunately, they report
Right.
3 years in arrears, so we don't have direct control over that. It just so happens that we have already met the targets for all of the other areas, which is great news. But that's why it looks unusual that we've only missed that one target. Yes, it is a challenge because it means, particularly now that we're reaching the end of this 2021 to 25 budget period, we don't actually know for sure if we've met the budget. It looks, based on the trajectory so far, it's likely we can recover our position and end this 21-25 budget on target. But as we go into the next budget period, which is a significant step down in terms of the total amount of emissions, that's feeling like it is a challenge. Yeah.
That's interesting though. So it's essentially a national delay in the monitoring our own targets. But okay, thank you for that clarification. On the action plan updates is already useful information. Thank you for putting it all together and seeing it all there. It's really, really clear. Do you have any detail at the sort of district level? You've got sort of numbers that have been met, the various targets across the county. Do you have that data broken down by districts? It'd be really interesting to see that if you did.
Are you talking about sort of EV charging and that kind of thing?
Any of the action targets?
So, what I can start and then you pick up. So some of the data, such as EV charging, is published at a district level. So absolutely, you can very easily point you towards that data. It's very, very easy to get a handle on. Emissions data is published at a district level as well, and there's district breakdowns at the end of Annex 1 or Annex 2, or Appendix 2, sorry, to this report is county-wide greenhouse gas emissions. But if you go to the end, lots of breakdown, so that will help you to some extent with that. If you've got any other questions which you'd like me to take away and look into, I can. Specific questions.
I think it's more a general point that if there is that information at the district level, it just helps us with our own crimes. Obviously, we're contributing towards the whole, but just at that more local level. I mean, you mentioned the breakdown of emissions at the end, which is very interesting, and it shows that Cherwell is not as good as some of the other districts for emissions, but I'm assuming that's mostly because of the M40 going right through Cherwell.
Exactly, so beat yourself up too much. Yeah, the M40, so that's why you've got such a chunky and A roads as well, and 34. So yeah, that accounts for quite a lot of it.
Okay, good. So if you reroute the M40 to get okay, thank you for that.
Good idea, David.
That's the suggest.
Turn it into an airport. Is there anything else before it? Okay, thank you. It's always interesting to, it's quite a broad range look at things. You've got item 8, which is the forward plan.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things, just to say that I will be adding to the forward programme. So for January, we hope to bring the LNP annual report, this is referring to the NRS launch today. And for January, the inclusivity of partnership annual report and the report for this committee itself. That's all, Chair.
Any questions on that? I was a bit worried that your January meeting was going to be quite thin, but you've especially quite a bit. So let's do my best. No further questions on that. Item 9 is update from strategic partnerships. So the first one I think is the East West Rail consultation. Liz, if you'd like to talk about that.
Yes, thank you. There was a debrief form given to the partners across the region last week sometime, can't remember exactly which day, but there is a very full report which has been published. But I'll give you a few highlights that relate to Oxfordshire specifically. First thing to say is it's a bit disappointing that actually, although the first leg of East West Rail was due to be opened in December, unfortunately, because of dispute with the unions, it appears that's not going to happen. We don't exactly know when it's going to open. It's also somewhat dependent on plans for the station as well, although I think it's fair to say that the news on the county branch line is very helpful, because there has been a discussion about where East West Rail would land up, because they can't actually stop and turn around at Oxford Station, so there was a question around where they would go. One of the options is to go down to Cowley and reverse there, and then the other is Didcot, but that's something to be decided still. But the main piece of news really is that the question of London Road in Bicester was part of the consultation. We have been, as the County Council, very clear that we do not believe that an up and over bridge, which is what they're proposing, is the right way to deal with that, because that would be difficult for pedestrians, impossible for cyclists, and obviously impossible for road users generally, for cars, etc. The local MP, Callum Miller, has been campaigning for a road underpass, a motor underpass. And I'm happy to say that they have conceded that an underpass is an alternative. However, it's also true to say that that is not funded. The County Council has put aside a small amount of funding which will go towards whatever solution comes forward, although, as I say, we're adamantly against the idea of an up and over bridge. We would like to see some sort of a solution that includes pedestrians and cyclists. So we'll be working with Callum, but also working with East West Rail and DFT to see whether we can find a solution to this. But they have expressed an interest in finding a way forward with the underpass, so that's good news. And that's the main thing, really. I think there's quite a lot of other stuff in the report, but it largely relates to some of the stations that are being proposed on the bit of the line beyond Bletchley. But as far as Oxfordshire is concerned, the fact that they are open to a discussion around London Road is very, very good. But as I say, we'd have to find the funding to do it.
And while you've got the conch, if you'd like to carry on with the EEH update.
Yes, absolutely, Chair. I think at the last meeting I mentioned that England's Economic Heartland is the only subnational transport board that's going to receive funding from government in the future. It will be less than we currently get, but it's very good news that it's happening at all. And there was a discussion between the board set up a working group which included me. Last Friday we had our meeting, and what some of the things that came out of that I think may be interesting to the meeting here. The first thing is that we need to focus on the things that we can do really well. Some of the things that EH has done previously included things like working on roads and buses and things like that, but I think we really need to focus on the railway line and integrated services along that line, which includes some bus services, obviously, but things like integrated ticketing, how we can work with the bus companies to make sure that we deliver an integrated service across the whole of the network. So that's going to be a focus. The other thing that we talked about was data and analysis, which I think a lot of the upper tier authorities that have responsibility for transport find incredibly useful. So it was decided that we would continue with doing that, so that we could support some of the local authorities across the region. I think in turn, Oxfordshire certainly uses the work that EH does, and I think some of the other authorities do as well, and that data analysis is very helpful. And then also on convening with other partners across the region to make sure that we are able to advocate to Whitehall, to advocate to other bodies, etc. The case for having an integrated rail network across the region. Obviously, one of the other things which is really important and which came up at the Energy Summit last week, which was held by Cav Ellithorn on behalf of the Oxford-Cambridge corridor. Energy is a really key part of this, because of course you can only really have an electrified railway line if you've got the energy to run it. And one of the things that we did discuss in our meeting the other day was whether or not we would have some kind of a relationship with the corridor in bringing forward some of the power options that might exist. So, for example, one of the things that has been discussed, though not, I have to say, in the Energy Summit the other day, but for example, having solar panels along the side of the railway line, things like that, which we need to consider and which I think would make a lot of sense. So what we will be focusing on is integrated transport, data and analytics, and advocacy for special projects that relate to all of that, and convening with other bodies, including some of the people we've already been working with, such as, for example, the universities group and the supercluster across the region. We are not going to be doing things like working on, regional transport strategy as such, because we're going to be focusing on East West Rail and the connectivity around that. So in terms of funding, there will be a reduction in funding, which will mean that there will have to be a reduction in staffing for EH. But I think given the reduction in the amount of work that we're going to be doing, that can be managed. How long we're going to get that funding for, at the moment, it looks like it's going to be about 3 years. It could be beyond that, we don't know. And a lot will depend on what happens with the Oxfordshire-Cambridge corridor.
Thank you. Certainly welcome the focus onto the regional things that you can do. The last meeting I went to, intricate discussion on Luton's buses, which
does tend to dominate meetings sometimes, Chair. Yes.
Yeah.
And the other thing, by the way, that we agreed is that we wanted to remain a partnership body rather than formalising ourselves into being a community interest company or something like that. So it will still be a standalone body, and then one of the authorities will be the accountable body for that.
Any questions for us on that? Which case we'll move on to the next one, which is the launch of the local nature recovery strategy. I think quite a few people were at that. Bethia, do you want to?
Thank you. Yes.
Can chip in.
The launch of the Oxfordshire Local Nature Recovery Strategy, the LNRS, took place at the Oxford University Museum of Natural History, based back on Wednesday, 12th November. It was hosted by Oxfordshire County Council, thanks Liz, and Oxfordshire Local Partnership. The LNRF is a county-wide plan, as you know, setting out the priorities and actions to restore biodiversity across the county. It includes a detailed interactive map and a list of species and habitat priorities. And that is all live now, which is really fascinating, and I've been playing with it. It's got obviously had input from all of Oxfordshire's local authorities, businesses, charities, and more than 3,000 local people. And you can access it through OCC's website. Oxfordshire is among the first county to launch its LNRS. I struggle with that. And it positions the region as a leader in nature recovery and climate resilience. It aligns with national priorities and Oxfordshire's own climate and biodiversity commitments. And the event was attended by a wide range of people across various sectors, from farming, local funding bodies, universities, landowners, large local nature local organisations, and it just reflects what we've been working on and building up over the last couple of years' work through the local partnership. That we heard from Liz, obviously, and various speakers, including Estelle Bailey of BBOUT, and community action groups, Oxfordshire. So there was a lot of input there from Tim Coates, who is the North East Cotswold Farmer Cluster. So as well as individuals working on the ground to deliver nature recovery in Oxfordshire. We also heard from Minister Mary Cray from DEFRA, who gave some hopeful signals about national priorities, highlighting the role of nature-based solutions and encouraging strategic authorities with responsibilities for nature and climate to lead delivery locally. She also emphasised that upcoming legislation, particularly the Devolution Bill and the Water Reform Bill, presented opportunities to embed nature recovery into local planning and delivery. So the launch strengthened connections across sectors and reinforced our shared commitment to enhancing biodiversity, supporting sustainable land use, and building a resilient natural environment for Oxfordshire. And I'd like to thank Becky Cheshire and Matt Whitney from the Oxfordshire Local Nature Partnership and Kerry Edwards from OCC for organising it all. Obviously, the county council as well. And just finally, I think generally as a group of leaders, we need to stress how important it is that this work is considered not as an add-on, but at the forefront of conversations for the new unitary authorities, whatever. And indeed that nature is placed front and centre of the vision for any Thames Valley strategic authority. Having that messaging at this level, at the highest level of leadership locally, with the narrative and communications for Oxfordshire's future will help ensure it's prioritised within future strategies and plans. So it was a really great event. So it's good to see David there and Liz there. It was very, very positive.
Would anyone like to add or ask any questions?
I think that's very thorough. Thank you. Thank you. It was a very good event. I was only able to be there for half of it, but it was great to be able to go down there and just listen to how important that whole agenda is for the county and how important it is for us, as you say, but it's to really prioritise it and work on.
Well, I would just add one other thing actually, which is that I think the reason that Mary Craig came was because we are ahead of a lot of other counties in doing this. So I think, you know,
One of the best, yeah.
we need to thank everybody that's been involved in this, and particularly the group that's headed by Richard Benwell for having brought this forward, because I think it really is an amazing document and we've done a great job on it.
I think it's something definitely to be proud of.
Yeah.
Looking forward. Yeah. And it's a dynamic document as well. It's not going to just...
Yes, and that's the other thing. You can sort of look at different bits of the map and find out, you know, what's in various fields that needs to be taken into account when looking at things like, you know, building sites and all the rest of it. Really, really excellent work.
And we shouldn't underestimate how important the whole nature agenda and nature recovery is to our residents.
Absolutely.
Whether that's in a rural area or in an urban area, it's important for us to appreciate that and put that at the part of what we do in that decision making.
I think we recruited well on the local nature partnership. I've never felt more inadequate in my life when I go to those meetings, and you have people who have PhDs in a particular form with chalk stream or whatever, and will set you straight if you're ever tempted to venture. Moving on, item 10, which is updates on matters relevant to the committee. First of all, we've got a couple to give us updates on their local plans. Susan first.
Yeah, thanks very much. We carry on, and I think you are all aware that Caroline wrote to her fellow district chief execs on the 31st of October to set out the details of Oxford's unmet housing need arising from our local plan 2045, and to ask whether, in principle, your councils would be able to help meet this need. So I just wanted to put on the record that we're grateful to receive positive responses to this letter from Charwell, South, Vale and West, and for your willingness to work with us on addressing the unmet need. We absolutely recognise the commitments you previously made to meeting need from our adopted local plan, and we look forward to further constructive working on the preparation of all of our plans under the duty to cooperate.
Thank you. Any questions, comments on that? In which case, Andy, update on West.
Yes, thank you very much. And following on from that, we're at the final stage of Reg 18 at the moment, and our consultation finishes at the end of or just before the end of December, and then we'll be evaluating and doing all the work we need to do and continue our duty to cooperate as we have started already, and we'll continue to our duty to cooperate, so that in preparation for our draft Reg 19, our draft local plan, which will go out in June of next year. So it's been a very good consultation process. This is our fourth with residents and communities and businesses, and they have impacted the development of this plan. and that's demonstrable. And I think that's good for local democracy and for developing a really community-led approach to this. So just wanted to put on record that.
Thank you, Andy. The next item I've got is Liz to give us an update on the nervous about calling it fly tipping. It's industrial level.
Definitely more than fly tipping. Yeah.
Legal.
Illegal dump.
Yes. Over to you, Liz.
Okay, so thank you to Robin, who's been working tirelessly on this for the last few weeks, I think. Just to say that we had an update yesterday from the fire service, who are obviously very conscious that there is a fire risk. They are working hard with other authorities, other fire authorities, to make sure that nothing untoward happens there. They were talking about possibly putting some fire breaks in there just to make sure that if anything did happen, it would be safe. One of the biggest concerns is that there has, because of the rain that we've had recently, there's been some slippage of some of the rubbish into the Cherwell, and a boom has now been erected to prevent that from happening. There's also 24-hour security on the site as well, which is very important, just to prevent anybody from going in there, because it is quite dangerous, I suspect, for anybody. There is a footpath over it, by the way, over that field, which has been closed, and quite rightly. And there are also fences all round and barriers to prevent the waste from migrating anywhere else, blowing into other fields, etc. But the scale of it is huge. I mean, this is a 10-metre high pile of waste, and there are other piles in the field that we think have been put there over time and covered up with earth. So one of the things that we are very concerned about is what we do to move it out of the way and to restore the field. And we're looking at ways in which we can do that quickly. We had a meeting with officers yesterday to look at what we might be able to do to get really we just need to get it out of there and into some kind of a landfill site. David and I are going to be writing to the Prime Minister jointly, and one of the things we will be asking is that if we do put it into landfill, because I think that's the only solution, because we don't know what's actually in that waste, so taking it to Arden and burning it isn't really an option, and we think there might be things like asbestos in there. So we will probably have to put it into some kind of landfill, and we will be asking government to waive any fees associated with that, because that could add significantly to the cost. I think as a county council, obviously we can't afford to do this on our own. We have been pressing the Environment Agency. The Environment Agency have been treating this as a criminal, as a criminal matter, rather than thinking about how we can move that waste out of the way and make it safe for people. Whereas we're thinking a bit more about, how do we make it safe? We will do what we have to do to make that happen, and we will be working in partnership with the Environment Agency and indeed the Minister, Emma Hardy, to make sure that it is done and done very soon. I think the only other thing to say is that earlier today it was confirmed that the Environment Agency have actually arrested somebody about this. There's one person been arrested so far. I gather there was a dawn raid on somebody's home, but there are obviously more than one person involved in all of this. It's been a major operation, and clearly lots and lots of people have been involved. So there's still a lot of work to be done, but I'm happy to say that we are making some progress, and I can confirm that we will do what we can to get this sorted out as quickly as possible. I don't know if you want to add anything, Robin, because you've obviously been very involved in all of this.
No, very comprehensive, although I certainly have. But it's been a substantial team effort. Lots of officers from Cherwell, Thames Valley Police, Oxfordshire Fire and Rescue, and of course the Environment Agency and other Thames Valley Local Resilience Forum agencies. The only thing I would say, and apologies, leader, we don't think there's asbestos in the pile. We think there's a risk. Of course, there's a risk, but we don't know what's in the pile, so we need to treat it very diligently. We don't have any evidence that there is. At this point.
No, I think it's just a rumour that there might be. Yeah.
Susan.
Thank you for the work on this. Two things really. One is that I'm happy to sort of add any support if needed to any communication you're putting out, because obviously there's big implications for Oxford as well. We're just down the river, and it's good to hear that the river is being as protected as it can be at the moment. And the second thing I was really pleased to hear about was the security, because I have seen some really concerning videos online of people climbing all over it, which is really clearly extremely dangerous and unwise. And I'm assuming and hoping that those videos took place before the security was put in. But it's good to hear that there is security now.
Can I just jump in before you do, David, because I'm assuming you know quite a lot about this. If you could just clarify who's responsible for what in terms of agencies, or does Robin responsible for everything?
So our formal role of the County Council is as the Minerals and Waste Planning Authority. So we have a role around waste around planning enforcement, and that's how we were involved. Chelsea District Council took one of the first observations of what was going on as a local on the ground agency. The Environment Agency is the lead agency, agency, and has declared this a critical incident in their lexicon. They're responsible for environmental crimes, pollution protection, and protection of the river. Ultimately, the policy approach is that the landowner is responsible. Clearly, tracking down the landowner and making them act is a considerable challenge in these circumstances, and that's what's been going on.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's been very difficult to track the landowner.
Yeah, so it's reported to Chilwell. Initially, Chilwell reported it to the County Council and the Environment Agency. It was a big meeting convened in the Environment Agency, recognising the scale of it, so responsibility at that point, so they've been working on it since then. So it's good. It is good that they have declared it a critical incident now and are taking it seriously, obviously, and residents of the local area, and as you say, and officers as well, want action taken on it as soon as possible to address this. I mean, there's a quite a blight on the landscape. It's more than just that. It's absolutely massive, isn't it? It's huge. It's very concerning to all of our residents. I mean, obviously, there's a criminal investigation underway, but the scale and the potential environmental impact of it, including pollution of the River Cherwell, requires it to be addressed swiftly. So we will continue, as Liz has said, to continue to apply pressure on the government and the relevant agencies to address this as swiftly as possible. We want it gone from the site.
Anything else on this? Thanks for that. David, you wanted to share something about Campsfield?
Yeah, just very, very briefly on Campsfield House, as you all know, that's reopening soon, and I can just confirm my understanding is it's going to reopen as an immigration removal centre at the very beginning of December, and from then there'll be a gradual increase in capacity at the site up to, I understand, the number will be 160 to start with, but there's plans that the government has plans for increasing that into the future. So just so everybody's aware that is imminently reopening now, and obviously it's a government-led thing that we don't have any say in, but it's obviously in our county, so we want to keep aware of what's happening with it.
Andy, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I do. On that score, really, I mean, I've read the details as scant as they are available, and I'm just really quite concerned that we get the communications right, because Upper Campsfield is actually right on the border of West Oxfordshire, and in particular Woodstock. And I just wanted we need to get some communications over the security to give reassurance to our communities through the local councils, so it doesn't suddenly get caught up in a noise and misinformation saga that often accompanies this. We've already made our positions clear. The government chose not to actually take much notice of it, otherwise it wouldn't have gone ahead, but here we go. I think it's most important to get the communication. So how are we going to do that is my question. And David, if you have information, please, obviously I know I can rely on you to share it, but I think it should be just wider understood what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we can discuss that, what communications are, and in terms of what the government is going to be doing indeed on it as well, in terms of communications.
Well, no, it's just that point. It is a Home Office facility, So the key is working with them for them to get the communications out and right. I know the leader and I are meeting with the relevant Home Office officials at some point later next month. So we'll certainly take the opportunity to raise that with them again then. And I know the various forums, and Nicola is doing what she can on that front.
Okay. Anything else on that? In which case, I think that's all I had for that item. Oh, I think that's a legacy hand, isn't it, Andy?
Yeah, sorry.
And so item 11 is date for the next meeting, which is 20th of January. So you all be full of Christmas cheer and working the way through January by then. Thank you. Pleasure as always.
Thank you. And thank you, Chair, for chairing and, you know, for the very best.
Thank you from the blind date spot, which seems I can see you, but you can't see me, or you might do from time to time. See you. Bye.